It's a good day to be a guardsman today, as Games Workshop have revealed several powerful new abilities from the new Psychic Awakening book to strengthen the Astra Militarum. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we'll be looking at the Warhammer community preview for the new Imperial Guard rules that are coming in the Psychic Awakening book at the weekend. The Guard have got custom regiments, new tank ace rules, and a bunch of new interesting stratagems. And we haven't seen half of what's coming in the book yet, so I'm extremely optimistic for the Guard getting a much needed boost. Before we start though, I've just got to hand it to Games Workshop. They've managed to release an Imperial Guard rule set with a big picture of a Tau battlesuit on the front. Thereby any guardsmen who are going to be picking up this book will be carrying around a nice Tau cover book, presumably for the rest of 8th edition. I'm sure that won't rankle at all with anyone. Anyway, all that aside, there's some really good stuff here, so let's get into our new options. Firstly, as with a lot of the Psychic Awakening releases, we have access to custom regiments now. This means instead of selecting Cadian, Kaschan or something like that, we'll be able to pick 2 traits from a list of different options and combine them together to make a tailored regiment for a certain battlefield role. I'd say that this looks like, from the pattern of the previous releases, that it means that we won't be getting any sort of overarching single faction benefits for just being pure guard if it falls into pattern with the previous Psychic Awakenings. On the other hand, that does mean that, at least in the competitive game, you could have multiple different detachments, with each one perfectly tailored towards buffing the units that are in that detachment. So you could have one that's great for tanks, maybe run it as the Emperor's Fist Vigilus detachment, and have 2 powerful tank traits there. And you could put the majority of your infantry in a second detachment, and maybe combine 2 buffs that are great on infantry. This isn't even all that unfluffy, as you frequently get mixed regiment armies fighting alongside each other, such as an infantry regiment covering for a tank regiment that might be drawn from completely different areas of the galaxy. On this page we can see that there's 4 new traits that have been teased, some better than others. For the tanks, we have Gunnery Experts on the top left. This is essentially the Kaschan tank buff, which is a very good one to be honest. This is the one where when you roll to see how many shots a heavy D6 or heavy D3 weapon is, you can re-roll the dice if you don't like the result. Great on things like Wyverns, Lehman Russ battle tanks, anything packing plasma cannons, manticores. There's really a lot of options with this. It's great in Kaschan, and it's great that we can combine it with a second trait to make some excessively powerful tanks. They've shown us off another couple of different traits for vehicles here. First of all, we have Combined Auspex on the top right. This is an interesting Overwatch buff, where if your vehicles are within 3 inches of each other, they'll Overwatch on 5+, rather than on a 6+. Now, I'm not always the biggest fan of Overwatch buffs on vehicles, just because if something's charging your tanks, then something's gone pretty wrong in the battle plan. But it can give you a nice buff if you happen to meet these criteria. It's not really quite as powerful as, say, the Mordian trait, which is just 5+ Overwatch for everyone forever, but it's certainly not a bad pickup if you are running a big tank army. Finally, on the bottom right, we have Jury Rigs Repairs. Now this one is a really nice one and I like it a lot. Basically, at the start of your turn, roll 1d6 for each vehicle model in your army that has taken damage. On a 2 to 4, it regains 1 lost wound, and on a 5+, the model regains up to d3 lost wounds. Now this one is absolutely insane. You've just got yourself a free use of the jury rigging stratagem for every single vehicle in your army on every turn for free. You can even stack this with repairs based from a Tech Priest Engine Seer or something from the AdMech Codex, so your tanks could be regenerating a really decent amount of wounds every turn. This one really is very powerful indeed, and it will really punish your opponent if they manage to half kill a tank but not kill it the entire way through. And that tank could very quickly start regaining function again. It might even gain enough wounds to take it from one bracket to the next. Just off the face of it, I could easily see Gunnery Experts with those reroll shots and Jury Rigged Repairs for the regenerating vehicles going together very nicely on a tank regiment. That's a very nice offensive and defensive buff all in one. Finally, out of these custom regiment traits, we also have Disciplined Shooters. This is the only one that we've seen for infantry so far, and this is essentially the Armageddon infantry benefit, where rapid fire weapons can fire at 18-inch range, and they can double fire when they do so. Now this isn't taken an awful lot as the Armageddon Legion in itself, but I think that's at least partly to do with the other options from Armageddon not being all that great. It's not really all that bad a buff on itself for an infantry or mechanised infantry focused list, and it will remain to be seen exactly what we can pair this with to get the best out of it. Nevertheless, it's a solid boost. I could certainly see it justifying 1/2 of the combined regiment bonus. Now the main downside to using these custom regiments is that we will be losing the unique characters, stratagems, relics and warlord traits that come with each of the main regiments if you choose to make your regiments entirely out of custom ones. So I think that there is going to be some trade-off between going for these new custom traits and employing these standard guard ones, in particular with things like Cadian, where their overlapping fields of fire is a really important part of their whole regiment's functioning, and the Relic of Lost Cadia is an also very powerful one, doubly so against Chaos. So I think we're going to have to see the entire list to make 100% decisions for which shakes out to be best, but just remember that you can have different detachments functioning as different regiments and employing different traits for the units that are strongest with that trait. I certainly think that we'll be seeing some of these in the competitive field of the game. Even with no other information, gunnery experts plus jury-rigged repairs seems very strong. Now let's move on to some new tank goodness, as Games Workshop have given us another stratagem called Tank Aces, which can be used once per game to give a very powerful buff to one individual tank. You have to use it before the game, and you nominate any one Astra Militarum vehicle model from your army. Now it's worth noting that it says vehicle, not Lehman Russ, so you don't even necessarily have to use this on a Russ. You could use it on Basilisks, Manticores, Flyers, any super heavies, anything like that at all. Though it is worth noting that both of these ones that have been leaked only impact certain models. They've also stopped Brood Brothers from using this stratagem, meaning that it's unique to the Imperial Guard and not when they're fighting alongside Genestealer cult allies. So the two that we have leaked are incredibly powerful. First we have Steadfast Leviathan. You basically use this on a super heavy Lord of War, and it gains a regimental doctrine, even if it's in a super heavy auxiliary detachment. Now this is really helpful and makes a lot of sense. It was a bit strange having to cram your super heavy vehicles into a Supreme Command detachment to get the bonus of being the regiment that they were part of, so you can rectify that with a single command point and get them their regimental doctrine. Could be particularly good for things like Kastian to reroll the number of shots each big gun has, Valhallan for slower degrading, or Vostrion for longer range, and I believe it would probably work with these new custom regiments that we get, so you could literally use this to tailor a specific set of traits to use on that tank, although to be fair, often it's best to have a regiment that has a great stratagem, such as making it Vostrion with that +1 to hit stratagem, which is very powerful on super heavies. Really good, I like it a lot, could certainly be worth 1 command point, particularly when affecting such a big tank. Secondly, we also have Weapon Expert, which is an ability which is used on Lehman Russ tanks, and it improves the armor penetration characteristic of the turret weapons this model is equipped with by 1. Now the turret weapons, anything like the Battle Cannon, Punisher Gatling Cannon, Eradicator Nova Cannon, all of that stuff, so getting an extra AP-1 on such massive guns is really powerful. My first thought is that this is going to be amazing on Punishers, who have a really decent rate of fire and high damage output, and if you go from AP-0 to AP-1, that'll give you a massive impact against a large amount of targets, particularly things like Marines in cover with 2-up saves, but anything with a decent save will certainly feel the pain. It'll also be great on battle cannons, as their -2 AP can sometimes hold them back, though even things like Demolisher cannons and Executioner plasma cannons will enjoy going to AP-4, cutting through 3+ armor saves that we're seeing all over the place with Marines with ease. Finally, I think that this one might have been overlooked, is that I believe that the Hammer of Sunderance, the relic from the Vigilus detachment, is also classed as a turret weapon, so you could have your flat 3 damage battle cannon going off at AP-3 now. Admittedly, that's putting quite a lot of eggs in one basket. You'll have been spending 2 command points in that one tank, so you'll have to be pretty sure that it's not going to get taken out immediately. But the Hammer of Sunderance already has a ludicrous amount of damage output. Countering one of its main weaknesses, of mediocre AP, is certainly incredibly powerful. I think that this stratagem is probably going to be an auto-include whenever you have vehicles of any reasonable size in your Astra and Militarum forces. It'll be good to see what the other options are, particularly if we get anything for artillery, or other fun options for Lehman Russes. A great little rules addition this one, and not one that I was expecting. Finally, from this preview, we also have some useful stratagems, and frankly all of these are quite good. First of all, we have Shield of Flesh, which is a Borgrin specific stratagem. This one was teased on the Warhammer community Facebook site. Basically, you use this in your shooting phase, whenever an infantry unit next to some Borgrin is the target of an attack. Until the end of the shooting phase, you must subtract 1 from the hit roll when targeting that unit, provided there are Borgrin closer to the unit that is shooting at it. I think I have mixed feelings about this one. It's a powerful stratagem, no doubt about it, the main downside being that our infantry units tend to be fairly cheap and often not really worth protecting with a 1 command point stratagem. In particular, Bulgarin are likely to want to be moving forward to threaten the midfield, and if you truly want an infantry unit to remain safe, it's probably best off not trying to push forward into no man's land. Having said that, I think that this could be quite powerful if you're thinking about combining some guard infantry squads to make a really big squad that can receive single unit buffs and stratagems very well. You could potentially combine this with Night Shroud to make a unit -2 to hit, provided the Bulgarin in front of it don't die, and that could be quite scary on a big unit of 20 to 30 guardsmen, depending on how many squads you've combined. It could also be decent on veterans, who have reasonable damage output but not quite as good defense, and help them keep alive plugging away with some plasma guns for a bit longer maybe, or perhaps even with some Ogrin, if you had a big squad of them just behind some Bulgarin. There might well be other important uses that I've not thought of for this yet, so let me know if you can think of anything. Next up we have splash damage, also for 1 command point. This one is used by any of the Hellhound variants. This is an interesting and powerful counter cover option. Basically you use this when you're selecting your Hellhound variant to shoot with, and its target is claiming the benefit of cover. That can either be if the unit's in cover itself, or if it's using one of the rules like the Marine's stealthy traits, which will give it a cover save even when it's out in the open. And when you target that unit, you can re-roll the wound roll for any attacks made by the Chem Cannon, Inferno Cannon, or Melter Cannon. This is actually quite funny because it means that units that are receiving the benefit of cover might actually be more vulnerable than they would have been otherwise if you use this stratagem on a Hellhound to clear them out. Full rerolls to wound are particularly powerful against very tough units. In particular, this could really mean that a Hellhound could stack quite a lot of wounds on a toughness 7 or 8 model, for example. And the Melter Cannon from the Devil Dog will certainly love this against any enemy vehicles that can claim a cover save to make sure all of that melter hits home. This one definitely could be worth it for a little bit of extra damage output out of your Hellhound. Finally, I think we have come to the best stratagem of the 3, and it's actually a stratagem that's aiming to make Armoured Sentinels or Scout Sentinels legitimate damage dealers, at least in the first battle round. This one is 1 command point, and it is called Strike First, Strike Hard. Basically you declare it when a unit of Sentinels is chosen to shoot with, and that unit gets a whopping +2 to the hit roll when it's firing its ranged weapons. Now this is a ludicrous damage increase, and naturally you'll get the most out of it the bigger squad of Sentinels that you have. My first thought with this is a match-sized squad of Armoured Sentinels equipped with las cannons and hunter-killer missiles. Now these guys are really cheap with the drops that both Armoured Sentinels and las cannons have got in repeated chapter approved. An Armoured Sentinel with a las cannon and hunter-killer missile is 51 points at the moment, so for just 153 points you could have a unit that's spitting out 3 crack missiles and 3 las cannon shots, all hitting on 2s, maybe even re-rolling 1s, if they're either Cadian or have another reroll 1's character near them like Yarick or Sergeant Harker. This is a really nice alpha strike that could easily eliminate a key target round 1. It is worth noting that you can only use this in the first battle round, so it is very much an alpha strike stratagem, but that's absolutely fine by me. If you go second, it's true that your opponent might well try and focus down these Sentinels, but Sentinels are really durable point for point, and if they're focusing a lot of anti-tank fire on them rather than taking out bigger, more high priority threats like Russes, then in general that's still going to be a good thing. Just doing the quick maths for a Sentinel barrage like this against a typical toughness 7 vehicle, even without reroll 1s, they still do almost 9 wounds on average to it, between all of those hunter killers and las cannons. Very nice indeed, and could certainly mean that we see a unit of Sentinels included like this in some competitive armies. Overall, I think that these are some really nice options for the Guard. I'm very keen to see what else we get in the Psychic Awakening book overall. I'm wondering if this is the majority of what we're getting, or whether we'll see some interesting new rules for Militarum Tempestus as well. If so, then I guess we might see them previewed tomorrow. Either way, I'll certainly be covering the full rules for the book as soon as I have them available, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that. Overall, I'm very happy with this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below as always. It'd be good to hear what you guys think. If you've been enjoying these videos, the channel does have a Patreon page if you'd like to support it, and it helps me focus on making Warhammer 40k videos as more of a legitimate part of my job, rather than just in weekends and evenings. So any support that you could spare will be greatly appreciated, and of course a big thank you to my current Patreons. Thanks very much for listening. I'll hope to see you guys next time, and we will have a Guard Carnodon tank review coming out later in the day, so check back later if you'd like to see that.